This is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Meng Mangu, and with me we have Dr. Becky Grubbs, Dr. Yangki Zhou, Dr. Kevin Ong, Erfang. These are the five specialists, and also Laura Miller, our county agent, horde agent in Tarrant County. And also, like I announced in Facebook, that we have a mysterious guest today, and that's Dr. Carlos Bogaron, who used to be one of us, in extension. So let's get started today.
Mysterious. I like that.
Yes, mysterious. Yes. So Yangki, you're gonna go first. Yangki is still working on his webcam, but go ahead. We can hear you. What's this disease?
All right. Can you show me my slide? I have only one slide.
You've already muted yourself, Meng Meng.
Yes, I'm showing. Yes, I'm showing it.
All right. Well, my webcam is kind of slow, but I can talk. Nice to meet you, Carlos. I've been seeing you a while, and you look the same and more hair. All right. Well, so I just want to talk about one topic about what our usual plant pathology is doing when we see some interesting damage on the plants. In this case, it's on a golf course. All right, so this picture is 2009 in the golf course in Houston. So I called, and they have some, they mentioned the interesting disease they never seen before. Okay, so I visited and then look at it. And indeed, there is some issue going on. So I've never seen this before. And so first response from the manager is they are very stressful, because first of all, this disease are never seen before. They don't know what it is, and because of that, they are very scared. Okay, are they going to losing all the grasses, or how are you going to change their practice? Okay, so that's the kind of first thing when you see some new disease, or maybe some of the disease already known in other location, but is always this disease moving around. So we are experienced the COVID-19. This one has never been before, and it kind of spreading, right? When you got new emerging disease or never seen before, right, found in other locations, it's scared. First response is scared. The first response is because we don't know what is this, and this uncertainty is the fumed scare, and so. That's the first step. The proper diagnostic is really, really important for responding to disease. Okay, so first my reaction for plant pathology, trying to do it, and go check the diseased area and make sure it is main factor caused by some dropping the hydraulic fluid of their vehicle, or they spray wrong chemical, or they put some fertilizer but it's not uniformly distributed. Also have to rule out all possible practice, get all the information from the manager, and the weather, of course. And then everything's, so this is not, this is maybe the biological pathogens contributing this disease. So we collect samples, and we trying to isolate what it is, okay? And so So I collect the samples, and then we culture in the lab, and indeed some fungus growing out of it. Okay, but as you expected, there's a lot of fungi or bacteria in the soils and plants. So that's maybe, and there's so many microbes are. So when you isolate some suspected pathogens from the this plant, you can just say, yeah, I isolated bacteria or fungus. That you can't say this is really the culprit of the disease. Okay, so next thing I need to do is, okay, I isolate some fungus from here. Okay, and then I grew the plant in the lab in a clean environment, so make sure the plant is healthy, and then you inoculated this isolate pathogens on the leaf, on the soils, and then confirm that whether these pathogens you isolated are causing same disease that we see in the field. Okay, that's what we did in the lab, and then greenhouse and growth chamber, and we confirm, yes, these pathogens fungus we isolated indeed produce similar symptoms from the in the plant. So or in these cases, once we isolate this fungus, fungus looks all the same, similar looking, and so really we didn't know what this fungus is. Okay, and so next thing is we have to genetic barcoding to find out what this fungus is. Because the insects or other animals, you can relatively easy to identify their species based on the morphology, and because there are a lot of characteristics, but it's a fungus and bacteria is pretty much small organism and is very, very similar to each other. So the only confirm the diagnostic is based on the genetic barcode, their genome. So we did a sequence, and we kind of interpret the hallmark of this fungus genome, and then we had never been reported. So we have to name the scientific name on it in this fungus, and also we have to name the common name. Okay, so why do you call this disease? So we have to find some different name, but we end up with ink spot because it looks like a dark ink was spilled over the turf. So the official common name of this disease called ink spot. Yes, have any questions?
Why did you not call it the Yankee eye?
I don't want to put my name on the disease, so we just put the name of people can easily see it. It's mentioned, okay, and so we name it as the ink spot. So that was a common name right now. Is one of the group of a leaf spot. We all clump together that similar group of fungi producing leaf infection and causing the lesion on the leaf, primarily foliar disease because of that. So we name it, and we name it, and we know what is disease. And so then what? That's next step is we have named it, and so we need to find out how we control it. So since this is a fungal pathogen, so we tested the current fungicide available, whether this is to control this disease or not. Because if there's no name or any identification of disease, there's no label for the fungicide, right? So We tested in the field different available fungicide for labeled for the turf. And we tested, and then and with a couple year trials, we did find some. Some of the active ingredients are very effective to control this disease. So based on this information, the managers are using that the fungicide program, and this disease are under control. Okay, so it's a long story, but it's just this is typical approaches that the plant pathology doing it, and find out proper diagnostic is really critical, and then based on it we can develop solution. We can't eliminate this, but we can control the level of the customers' satisfactions. So I think that's my story for today.
Well, thank you, Joe. We have another story today. An Asian giant hornet.
Yes. So I think I was asked last week by one of our listeners, Dr. Becky Grubbs, to talk about this. What's commonly been referred to as the murder hornet in news and media, but is actually more commonly or appropriately known as the Asian giant hornet. We can go on to the next slide.
Let me point out, all the attendees today, you guys got a bonus for attending this live. You getting two handouts from
Pew pew.
Yes.
Yeah, one of them is a very entertaining read, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Another one is a nice little identification guide, which kind of separates out what the Asian giant hornet looks like versus some other common native wasps that we have. We can go on to the next slide. So, the scientific name is Vespa mandarinia, and you can go on to the next one. There is, I should mention, an actual, like a task force now. Oops. Not that far. Go back a little bit. All right, so it's originally native to Japan, South Korea, to India, and to Pakistan, right? So it's originally from that region, and it's a major predator of honeybees. And that's why I guess the news and media has been calling it the murder hornet, not because it's known for murdering lots of people. I mean, yes, it does kill people every single year, but if we're naming things based on whether they kill people or not, then we'd be calling all mosquitoes murder mosquitoes, because they kill an estimated 1 million people every single year from some of the viruses they transmit. So they are not a major concern for human harm. They can cause human harm, but they are devastating to honeybees, and that's kind of the concern. So what they do is they will go in, and actually you can go on to the next bit here. And this is one of the publications I sent you, kind of goes through the different phases of how they attack these honeybees. So they start off like in this hunting phase. Well, they will go by these beehives and snatch up honeybees. They decapitate them, make meatballs out of the thoraxes and take those back. But every once in a while, it's not exactly sure, at least based on this paper here, this is back in 1973, they started looking at this. They will go savage, right? They go into what's called slaughter phase, where there'll be a bunch of these wasps attack a honeybee hive collectively, and they will go on a rampage, like literally a rampage. And again, it's kind of entertaining to read this, because they will go on such a rampage that they will sometimes even run out of resources themselves, because they're not eating them, they're just decapitating. They're literally, this is like Red Wedding, Game of Thrones stuff going on here, right? They're just trying to decimate everything. And then once it's all done, they set up guards outside of the honeybee hive to basically now protect their new kingdom. And they will start harvesting, starting with the larvae of the honeybees, and then going back and taking some of the thoraxes of the honeybees they've ripped the heads off of for a couple of days until, when they're like decomposing already, then they kind of don't bother with it. But those larvae in there are the greatest resource. It's thought they're not really going for the honey. It's really the larvae that they want. And those guards outside, you have to be very careful, because they are quite protective. All right, so that's where they can, you can be more likely to be attacked if you approach. But again, this is around honeybee hives. Now, what's really interesting is that some of the honeybees, where this wasp is native, they have a defense mechanism against this wasp. So when these wasps are in there in small numbers, they're usually going there and they will start to release what's known as a pheromone, so a type of a chemical trace they'll leave on a honeybee hive to tell the other sisters to come and attack together. Well, those honeybees in these other regions will actually climb on top. Basically, you know, I think it's what is I can't remember who it is. Did like a little comic that it's like, you know, give that wasp the biggest hug of your life. You know, like hug this wasp like your life, you know, depends on it. And all these honeybees just get on top of that wasp and they start vibrating together. Their stingers can't penetrate the wasp, but by vibrating, they actually heat up the wasp. And the high temperature tolerance of honeybees, these honeybees is ever so slightly greater than that wasp. So they increase to the temperature where it cooks the wasp, but it's just below the temperature the honeybees can tolerate. So they actually cook the wasp alive. Our European honeybees here do not have that defense mechanism. Again, why it's of great concern if they became, that's a big if, they became established here. So we can go on to the next bit.
So are you saying that the native Asian bees, the Asian honeybees, have this mechanism, but the European honeybees do not?
Correct. And I don't know how many native Asian honeybees there are, but there are, yeah, some honeybees in Asia that have that defense mechanism, whereas our European honeybees do not. Correct. Yeah, so this wasp is currently not found in Texas, and the USDA has found a total of 2 of these wasps. All right, so it's quite a miracle that it's made such a splash in the news, especially now since these wasps were found back in December of 2019. Right, so that does not mean they're established. Right, they have not found nests in the U.S. yet. Right, so there's no signs they're established, and again, they were found in Washington State. Regardless, just to be on the safe side, and because it's created such a public concern, Governor Abbott basically asked AgriLife to start a task force. So we now have the Murder Hornet Task Force, which I'm very jealous that I'm not on because I want that on my CV, right? And I hope they make a sitcom out of, kind of like Space Force, where Steve Carell will be, you know, running this task force. But it's like, you know, it's brilliant, it's amazing. But, you know, joking aside, it's really nice because they'll kind of be prepared. That way we'll be prepared. So if they do get established, Texas will have a plan on how to either prevent their establishment and or what to do in case they do start to show in Texas. But again, they are not in Texas, so do not panic. Move on to the next slide. And so we have an excellent resource from Xanthi Shirley with the USDA. She's prepared this nice document on how to identify this wasp and then compare it to other lookalikes. So it is the world's largest hornet, about 1.5 to 2 inches long. It has large yellow-orange head with black eyes, and that contrasts a lot with the thorax. You'll notice this strong contrast. We have a black thorax and a very orange head. I also want you to notice how wide and large the head is relative to the thorax. Those are some pretty characteristic features combined with that pinched waist and the fact that they are absolutely massive. Thank you, Laura, for holding up a ruler in case no one has one at home. All right, go on to the next slide.
Big bug. I mean,
yeah, it's big. It's like, you know, the size of, you know, my thumb. I mean, they are big. They say they're like the size of hummingbirds and can sound like a hummingbird. Now, the closest thing we have to them in Texas are cicada killers, right? And those are all the ones on the right. They're about 1.2 to 1.6 inches long, and Dr. Bowling will will convert those into fractions for us here in a moment. That's an inside joke from last week. And you'll notice the cicada killers on the far right, their head is quite a bit smaller compared to the thorax as compared to the Asian giant hornet. And you'll also see the lack of contrast in color from that thorax to the head in that cicada killer. So we can go on to the next one. And so this is one of the things I included as an attachment that you can download for being here live. Once again, one of the excellent benefits of being here live. And you'll notice in the very middle there is the Asian giant hornet, or in the media is constantly being referred to as the murder hornet. I think the slaughter hornet would be more appropriate myself. But again, you'll see all the other native types of bees that you'd be able to see as like a bit of a comparison. So again, we don't have them in Texas. We don't anticipate it coming to Texas unless it first really establishes in Washington State, and then we would be on higher alert. But that's just there as a backup. And I think that's all I had, unless I had one more. No, yeah, that was it.
Now it's Laura's time.
Okay, so, well, actually, I thought I was going to do this after Becky, but I'll do it before because we're both talking about shade, but I'm talking about the tree part of it. She's going to talk about the stuff underneath it. So we often have, and even in this chat, we had a request for fast-growing trees. How do you get a fast-growing tree? And looking for data on tree growth rates is kind of interesting, but this was a study that I thought was somewhat applicable, and I like the way they did it. These are all trees that the city of Westminster, Colorado planted in 1992. They had a big campaign and planted a whole bunch of trees throughout the city. They mapped them. The Colorado State Forest Service tracked them and measured them each year through 2016 and developed these growth rates. So when you look at this list of trees, there's a whole bunch of stuff I wouldn't tell you to plant, including the number one, which is native to Texas and native to a part of Texas that doesn't have a whole lot of choices. So maybe if you're in the Panhandle, you might go for it. But cottonwood, we all know kind of the issues with cottonwood, the pests, the cotton, the weak wood, just a lot of things, the ginormous size. So you got to have a place. I wouldn't say, oh, go plant a cottonwood in your yard. It'll be great. But if you look there to the third thing on that list, it says oak, white. So white oaks, and there were 3 species that they lumped together in growth rate, but those all had almost 10-inch growth in diameter, which is pretty good over that time period. And the 3 species they lumped together were Quercus robur, which is I think it's just white oak, Quercus bicolor, another white oak, and then Quercus macrocarpa, which you may recognize as our native bur oak. So I started looking at that white oak group for some options that would be good for Texas, if you want to flip it on over. So this is my friend Garrett's little boy and his tree. They were both planted in 2016. And this little Monterey oak was a little seedling. It was, about that tall, little bitty baby. Went out in the front yard there. And you can see they've both put on some good growth. And Garrett, Orson's up to about, a little more than 3 feet, but look at that tree, by golly, it's really taken off. This is one of the Mexican oaks, so they're pretty common in Mexico, and they are considered to be a Texas native, but just barely. There's a little place along the Devil's River near Dolan Falls where in 1992 they found a small population of them. So we can call it a Texas native. That's down in South Texas, but still, we can call it Texas native. They've done well in the Metroplex. And it's kind of what you'd call a medium tree, but a fast-growing tree, but a nice one. All right, go ahead. Mung Mung, you can flop it on over there to the chinkapin oak. So this one is actually native to North Texas. This is a native tree at the Fort Worth Nature Center, and that's Parks Director, City of Fort Worth Parks Director Richard Zavala in the tree. Richard's about 5'9", just for a reference there on size. Chinkapin oak, among the white oaks, is known for its great tolerance of alkaline soils. So if you have a high pH soil, this is a great oak for you. It's gonna be able to handle a lot of different growing conditions. And also it's quite nice. Oh, I didn't mention Monterey oak is mostly kind of evergreen forest, but chinkapin does have this, I think, attractive kind of yellow fall color. It's going to be deciduous. It's kind of got what they call light colored bark. So the bark's kind of white. You can see that in the picture, and it's a very attractive tree, but also a good long-lived, fast-growing tree. All right, and then that brings me to, of course, the one I was going to mention, the macrocarpa, the bur oak. This is the one on the A&M campus, and you can see, oh, you can't quite see it, but on the side there, it's almost as tall as the the horticulture building there. So this is a large one at maturity. It's got large acorns that will fall on your head and hurt, and large leaves and large rough bark, and everything about it is really large. But if you've got space for it, it's a great tree. So that was my choice of a few fast-growing shade trees that you might want to consider for your landscape. Most of the things that grow fast are like, they're like break your heart. You know, they live real fast and they die real young, and they just, you know, they can grow, but they won't be around. But these are 3 good choices for the state of Texas that should do well in most locations and live a long, happy life and bring you joy and cast a lot of shade. So now I'll let Becky talk.
I love those options.
You're muted, Mung Mung.
Before Becky talk, I want to tag along on the trees. One of the ag agent in the Panhandle area sent these pictures, and because I have been, some of you probably know that I've been doing a lot of research on crepe myrtle bark scale, so I kind of became the default expert on crepe myrtles too. And I'm just going to ask you guys, just take a close look at these pictures, and I will reveal the answer, you know, later on, you know, at the end of the you know, the presentation. Just, you know, take a 5-second close look on these, you know, these marks, you know, the height of these marks. Just think about it and see who could get it right. And we have prizes from Dr. Kevin Ong, and he doesn't even know that he's going to give out prizes. So now I'm going to change the presenter to Dr. Becky Grubbs-Bolin to let her talk about throwing some shades.
Okay. Can you guys see everything?
Yes.
Awesome.
Everything.
Okay, so we had a request to talk a little bit about what grows in shade, and so I'm going to talk mostly about this from a turf perspective, and then I'm going to invite some discussion with our horticulturalists about alternatives to turf, because sometimes we have to explore that. So one of the first things I want to say is that even some of our most shade-tolerant turfgrass species are still going to require, in general, a minimum of about 5 to 6 hours of light per day. And there's a common misconception that some of our more shade-tolerant species, like St. Augustine, can basically grow in a dark room. And unfortunately, this is not true. So as trees mature and their canopies grow denser and we have increasingly dense shade, we may have to explore alternatives. And I know a few alternatives that I like are things like ajuga, frog fruit, ferns do really well in the shade. There are some of the sedges that do pretty well in the shade. Asiatic jasmine is a real popular choice. It's not my favorite. Personally, I find it kind of messy. But Laura, Mung Mung, what are your thoughts? What are some of your favorite alternatives to turf in the shade?
Anything not grass would be great alternatives.
Fern.
So I have a native plant suggestion. Lyre leaf sage is a great sage shade plant and quite attractive in the shade. Does seed out all over the gall darn place. And then if you don't mind, kind of a tall ornamental grass, Chasmanthium latifolium, the inland sea oats.
Oh, I love those. And they have
grow in the shade as a grass. It's kind of amazing. So,
yeah, they're beautiful. So the other thing that I'll mention is to remember or be mindful of the fact that growing turf under some of our trees can be challenging for other reasons beyond just shade. So we talked about this a little bit in a previous chat with Green Aggies, but you know, one of our most popular tree selections for a lot of Central and North Texas landscapes is going to be the live oak, and I love a live oak, but they do tend to be shallow rooters, and so as the trees mature, you'll have some physical competition for space. You'll also be limited as to the types of products that you can use. We talked about this when we discussed herbicides, because some of the herbicides, for example, that we may use most commonly to control weeds in St. Augustine grass grass are not going to be labeled for use around shallow rooted trees, as they can do some significant injury to the trees. And we talked about, as an example, atrazine is a herbicide that can create this issue. So that's another thing to be mindful of. Also, you know, in Central Texas, where we've got more post oaks don't really like wet feet. So if we're trying to maintain turf, we may end up compromising the tree. So that's something else to think about. And then we also see that some trees have allelopathic effects on plants around them. And so, you know, a lot of people are pretty familiar with some of the allelopathic effects of black walnut. And there's also kind of a neat review of allelopathic effects of some of the Quercus species, or the oak species that are out there. And you know, as the leaves and material from oak trees breaks down, sometimes those allelochemicals can create issues with our turf. So a lot of different kind of factors that play into that. But you know, as you guys are generally more professionals listening into this, you know, I would say that the biggest thing up front is to be really honest with your clientele about what turf can really tolerate, and be fair to them when it's time to look at, you know, choosing something different, and what that can look like for them. So just to kind of talk about some of our more shade tolerant grasses, I wanted to start with this one. Now, it is a Bermudagrass, which means it is not a replacement for something like St. Augustine grass. But if you're looking for a slightly more shade tolerant Bermudagrass that might do okay in a landscape with some filtered light, particularly, I think this can be a nice fit for landscapes that are relatively young, where you're going to have a little bit of some partial tree shade. So there was a study done in 2005 for Celebration that found that it maintained acceptable turf quality under 58% shade, compared with some of our two more popular hybrids at the time, which were Tifway 419 and Tif Sport, which only maintained acceptable quality under 41% shade. Other kind of little features about Celebration, it is a common selection, which means it's not actually a hybrid. It's a variety of common Bermuda grass that's been propagated, so tends to have a little bit coarser texture compared to some of our hybrids. And it also has a pretty attractive kind of blue-green tint to it that a lot of people really like. So that's going to be, quote unquote, our most shade-tolerant Bermuda grass, but still, Bermuda is not going to be nearly as shade-tolerant as a zoysia or a St. Augustine. So speaking of zoysias, again, these will be significantly more shade tolerant than Bermuda grass typically. Their performance in the shade is going to be highly variable depending on the species, the cultivar, the environment, management practices. We see a lot of variability in the performance of zoysia grasses. So a lot of times we generally think of the fine textured zoysias, like the one you see here on the bottom. These are the matrellas. They tend to maybe be a little bit more shade tolerant. However, we have had some really strong performers in the japonica or coarse textured category that have also exhibited pretty moderately good shade tolerance. So when I was reviewing some of the research, a couple of notable cultivars that kind of jumped out consistently in different studies included Emerald Zoysia, Cavalier, Diamond, El Toro, which is a little bit older now, maybe a little harder to find, Palisade, Zorro, and Xeon. So several of these are going to be pretty available through our growers here in the state. And then we've got St. Augustine grass. So of course, St. Augustine is widely considered the most shade tolerant warm season turf grass option that we have. And I just thought that I would do some very, very concise bullet points on some of the primary strengths of some of our more widely available cultivars here. So we've got Raleigh and Del Mar. These tend to be more cold tolerant cultivars. I would argue that Raleigh is probably the most widely planted for North Texas because of this improved cold tolerance. It also has some improved gray leaf spot resistance and resistance to other St. Augustine pests. Then we've got Palmetto, which has excellent shade tolerance. And this is one that I think is really popular as you kind of transition to Central and South Texas. Also pretty widely available. Palmetto originates from the Florida turfgrass breeding program, and a lot of the Florida St. Augustine grasses are going to have a little bit more blue in their coloring, so it can be really attractive in that regard. Amerishade is still available with some of our growers. This is a dwarf type St. Augustine. It's got pretty good shade tolerance. However, it's a little bit harder to come by than it used to be. And I have found that this one tends to have a lot more disease susceptibility, maybe compared to some of these others that I just mentioned. So, you know, some of that may be influenced by the way that it's managed, but just something to keep in mind. And then there is still Floratam as well. Floratam was a collaborative effort between Texas A&M and Florida. It's got these pretty distinctive kind of reddish purple stolons or runners to it. Improved drought tolerance. In fact, the city of San Antonio has a municipal ordinance in place right now that this is the only approved cultivar of St. Augustine for new construction in the city of San Antonio, based on some drought tolerance work that was done a couple decades ago. Again, this is another one that it can be hard to find pure stock of this cultivar these days. It also has a little bit more herbicide sensitivity compared to some of these others. So, you know, I think I mentioned this on another program, but you may see some products that are labeled to be used in St. Augustine with Floratam as an exception, meaning that it'll show more sensitivity than some of the other cultivars. So that's something to kind of be mindful of as well. Of course, Texas A&M has an active turfgrass breeding program here at the Dallas Center, and St. Augustine and Zoysia are the two primary grasses that the breeding program is focused on. There's more work than just that, but those are like our two main grasses, and we have 5 experimental St. Augustine grass cultivars being evaluated in kind of final stages right now. So we may see the release of a new St. Augustine grass here in the next few years. And really one of the big drives for that program is to really improve the drought tolerance in St. Augustine while preserving a lot of the other characteristics that people really like about this grass. Last thing that I'll just say are just a couple of little additional tips that I offer people when they have shaded areas. The first is to maintain a slightly higher mowing height. This can be counterintuitive, but the thinking behind it is that you're increasing the total leaf area that's there to utilize the more limited light. As you're able, depending on what else is going on in that shady spot, try to reduce your nutrient and water inputs in shady areas relative to full sun areas. Again, this can be counterintuitive for some people because they think, oh, they're in a stressed out place, I need to add more inputs to help them, you know, be less stressed. But unfortunately, you know, these are all ingredients that go toward producing new growth and energy. And so if we're missing the critical ingredient of light, these other things are not going to be helpful. And instead, we're going to see that doing too much water, too many nutrients, too much fertilizer in these shaded areas will potentially increase the likelihood of certain diseases, especially depending on the timing of application of those things. That can also have an impact on weed activity. So something that we want to avoid as well. And then just taking steps to try to improve airflow and filtered light through regular pruning to try to keep the area as kind of open and airy as possible with as much, you know, filtered canopy light as possible. So those are my thoughts on grass in the shade.
Hey Becky, 2 questions. Actually, if you want to show back, can you show your slides back then? And one is that, you know, if you look at this, you know, you see the mouse here. You know, I assume this is a big oak tree. So in the landscape practice, we will probably, you know, recommend a big, you know, based on the tree, the size of the tree, we will probably recommend a big mulching area. And especially, you know, you remember previously, several slides ago, you have that big tree, the roots going out. And that's going to be your shadiest spot, you know, on the lawn. So, but then again, you know, doing mulch will probably help, you know, managing those shady spots, not only for turf, but also, you know, a lot of those oaks have very shallow roots that it will help, you know, to maintain that, you know, not disturb the root system for, this one, yes, you know. I think, you know, having mulch there may be a better option.
Yeah, and I have it here. I didn't talk about it maybe as much as I should have, but I do have that there as kind of
Right.
Right. Considering mulch, especially for the immediate area around the tree. And yeah, I completely agree. I'm curious about y'all's thoughts on this. I already kind of have my own thought on it, but to get y'all's input. So I had a homeowner recently, out of frustration with the shallow roots of their live oak, asked me if they could bring in a truckload of soil to bury those roots as a way of supporting their turf.
Come on, y'all. I'll shake your head. Come on, Carlos. Just start shaking your head. Like, no.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. But
I was just trying to think of the logic there.
I wanted to hear it from my horticulture friends.
Are you talking about the volcanoes?
No, not even mulch. Soil.
Soil.
Yeah.
You know, I've read somewhere that like as little as 1 inch of soil fill can kill an oak. 1 inch, which wouldn't bury those roots. So, you know,
Actually, those post oaks seem to be very susceptible to that.
Very. Yeah, you see that in construction around College Station.
Yeah.
Very often.
They'll die.
Yeah.
I think I lost Dr. Ong.
No, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I can't share my webcam because apparently 6 is the limit, so I get to be incognito.
Okay, all right. Do you have your slides?
Okay. Yeah, can y'all see it?
Yes, Dr. Ong, because you're the last, we saved the best to last. You have only 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I hid my webcam if you want to flash yours up.
I don't want to flash my up. You're prettier than I am, so go ahead.
Yeah,
all right.
And also, you guys should have received those 2 handouts. So, check those out, and that's in the handout panel. There are 2 handouts. All right, Kevin, go.
All right, 4 minutes and 45 seconds. All right. So folks did ask about more information about daylily rust, and I guess at one of the last meetings that probably I wasn't at, Dr. Goose showed this pictures that she took. Well, guess what? I got pictures of my own too, and this was from the clinic, and we got a bunch that was from between 2005 and 2017. So those are rust pictures. So let's go on a dating trip with daylily rust. What is it? Where is it from? Who knows? Okay, so let's go. Origin, most likely Japan. First found in the United States, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, around 2000. I was in my last year in graduate school at Clemson, so I remember that very well because I was working at the clinic helping out the diagnostician there. By 2003, it was officially reported in 23 states. What's interesting was Texas was not one of those official states, but I do seem to remember that Dr. Barnes did say that he did pick it up here in Texas. That was, I think, my second year working for Texas A&M AgriLife. Quarantine and eradication. When it first showed up,
growers had it.
Yeah, I thought so. It's what, but the official record that we have at the clinic was a 2005 specimen. In terms of quarantine and eradication, when it first came in, they said, hey, we can get rid of it, so let's do quarantine regulations and let's start eradicating. Well, by 2003, those quarantines were lifted. There's a reason why that was lifted. When you get to a point where you can't really stop it, then you have to say, well, the quarantine is not going to work. We're not going to put undue stress on folks in terms of costs. So that quarantine was lifted in 2003. Current situation, it is considered endemic in the southern United States. So if you think about zone 7 and below, it's around here. Now, let's talk about details. What is it? It's a fungus. It has a name, Vaccinia Amarillo calidus. Say that quickly 3 times. It's fun. I won't give you a prize for that. It is, here's some interesting characteristics. Man, I feel like a matchmaker. It's an obligate parasite, which means that it needs a host so that it can get its nutrients. Another big one, heteroecious. It means it needs 2 different hosts to complete its life cycle. So here the 2 different hosts is daylily and Petrinia. Now, with most rust fungus, they're heteroecious, and so they usually have they need two different hosts. You may have heard of wheat rust, that's wheat and barberry. Then you got cedar apple rust, which is pretty active right now, cedar and apple. And what's cool about this Puccinia, it does produce the 5 different spores. So if you want to use it in a rhyme, Pycniospore, Aciospore, Eurydineospore, Tiliospore, and Basidiospore. Dr. Bowling, I challenge you to put that in a rap. Moving on. Let's talk about what we have learned since 2000 in terms of management. Well, one thing I need to point out, in 2000 when it first showed up here, we didn't know anything much about resistant cultivars in the US. We didn't have fungicide options available or known of what's active. So we have learned a lot of things since it showed up in the United States. So here I just list a few papers, and I hope that you can get back to this on the recording and find those papers if you're interested in. In 2003, there was a hot science paper by folks from University of Georgia, Mueller et al., that basically challenged 84 cultivars of daylily to this rust, and they found 14 were resistant. So that has been an ongoing process where they're looking and waiting for resistance. Yes, Dr.
Kevin, I'll get the publication. I'm also asking a colleague from Arkansas to send me his results, and he was just looking for it. So I'll put those 2 in the handouts in the next one, in the next weekly chat.
Excellent. You just cut into 20 seconds, so I'm going to take back 20 seconds. Fungicide treatments. Well, we did have a paper put out again by University of Georgia folks in 2016 in plant disease. And they were looking at a bunch of different combinations and all there, but short of it is they found that azoxystrobin or heritage is an effective fungicide. Now what was not said too is a lot of the fungicides that we have available, everything from daconil to mancozeb, copper sulfate, as well as the triazoles like your propiconazole, tabuconazole, will work on rust. Best management practices. If you're a producer, isolation, scouting, and early action. Sanitation and moisture management is also important because moisture is going to encourage germination and infection process on the daylilies. Now, for homeowners, we have always said, you can always prune down or cut down the leafy parts and then treat it, and so that what you're doing is protecting the new growth that's coming back here. Last slide here. If you're interested in learning about more about daylily rust, the American Phytopathological Society has a really cool page on the plant disease lessons series. I will provide Dr. Gu with that long URL that she can put it in the handout to you guys. 5 minutes, well, okay, 6 minutes. Hey, not bad.
No, you're doing very good. And Dr. Ong, I think we should really put out a extension publication for this, because I searched the AgriLife bookstore, and I did not see the that we have one. So I would really appreciate that we could work together or somehow get a publication, extension publication out. Okay. So coming back to this quiz that I throw at you, so this bark damage, and I got some answer in the audience saying this is varmint or something. So
hang on, Dr. Gu. Before you go on, Dr. Gu threw me under the bus and said, hey, there's I guess you could say things that you can win if you get it right. Well, Dr. Gu, I'm going to give folks, you're going to have an option of a hand lens or an origami microscope. And you might say, what's an origami microscope? It's a microscope that's made out of paper. It's a kit. Good luck. And Dr.
So it's a PDF attachment.
No, it's not a PDF attachment. You will get something in the mail if Dr. Gu will send it out to you.
We'll send it out, yes. Well, definitely.
I have 2 of those to get rid of. I mean, to give away.
What about the next face-to-face AgriLife extension event? So what I want to point out here, if you look, all these things. So varmints, deer, or hogs, and you could see that this is kind of in the neighborhood and stuff. So, and I'm not a hunter. I wish my husband could bring me some game, and just like Dr. Ong brings back to his wife and stuff. So I'm still waiting for my husband on that. So I don't have a very good knowledge of all the game animals in Texas, so I reply back, it could be like a deer or deer-like, or hogs or wild hogs or something like, with a horn, but this is really the wrong season for deer to, rub their antlers. And also it seems like there is these bite marks and stuff. So we also asked the agent to ask that the property owner, could there be any other possibility? So the answer to you is that we often don't consider them pests, but they're not pests. They're the little ones that we love. So they have a 3-year-old was testing his knife on this nice crapemyrtle plant. So when you see like there's almost like no pattern and stuff, so the 3-year-old, admitted that he was the culprit behind this bark. So not the game, not the thing. So it's interesting that in extension, this is so much fun about extension work. You never expect what kind of questions, what kind of damages that you may get from clientele. This is totally out of the blue, but this is just a fun thing that I wanted to share with you all.
That's a two-legged pest.
Yes.